All right, guys, here we go. LifeGroups Fall 2019. It is September 3rd today, and we are jumping into a study of Genesis. And I have to be honest with you, I feel a little intimidated by this study. There's just a lot there. Even look at my desk is full of books written by people who are way smarter than me, who have way more time, or have spent way more time in investing into study. The other thing with Genesis, especially Genesis 1, is that within Christendom, within Christianity and sound biblical theology, there's different views. And so from the get-go, especially in life groups, I encourage you to continue to take this posture of I don't know. If you don't know, you don't know. And really honing in on what do we know? What can we know from Scripture? One of the things that I'm finding in my study of Genesis 1 in particular, Genesis 1 and 2, which is kind of what we're going to be looking at over the next couple weeks, is that we have a certain worldview through which we view Genesis 1 and 2 that has really been shaped by our Western culture, particularly by the Enlightenment, the scientific revolution, and all those things. All those things can be very good. And certainly one of the things that we want to continue to emphasize is that faith and science are compatible. In fact, they agree with one another. We don't have to suspend one or abandon one for the sake of the other, even with potentially touchy and subjects like creation and Genesis 1 and the questions that revolve around that. But back to what I was saying, we typically approach Genesis 1 with how did God make the world? Because one of the main narratives out there is that of evolution. And so we as Christians feel responsible, rightly so, to combat that, the how things came into being with Genesis. And so, we really, we wrestle with that. We can go to Genesis 1 to see how God created the world, but really most of what we arrive at is that God spoke it into existence. And so there is an important reality and fact and truth that we find there in Genesis 1 is that all matter, all things are existing because God willed them into existence and spoke them into being by His word. Now, how long that took, what exactly that looked like and looked like throughout the course of history is a different story. There are all sorts of debates in Genesis 1. So for instance, you might have heard of the gap theory, that between Genesis 1, verse 1 and verse 2, there's a big gap. It's important to recognize, as per Wayne Grudem, if you look at his systematic theology, so even listening to a lecture by Darrell Del Husse, who used to pastor Scouts of Bible and was the president of Phoenix Seminary. They both will say, and I think agree with many other people in the church, that you can believe in the gap theory and be a Bible-believing Christian, and that's okay. You can also not believe in that, and we can sort of agree to disagree and have these friendly conversations and debates. Even the 7 days, are they literal? Are they more of a day age? There are Jesus-loving, Bible-believing, God-fearing people on both sides of that debate. Even getting into evolution, one of the things we've got to admit is that the concept of microevolution is a real thing. We can't really refute that. When you look at just the different ways that animals seem to have adapted, even in a short amount of time, the way that we can breed animals or flowers and plants and stuff like that, that is microevolution. But then there's the other side that we seem to always combat, is this grand theory of evolution, that things just sort of happen, that there's this randomness, this survival of the fittest that takes place. And certainly Genesis 1 and 2 speak against that theory as a whole. So there can be controversy over this. And so my heart for this discussion is that we get to what really matters here in Genesis. And so there can be a how, but I think what we're going to see in as we look at Genesis is that the authors seem to be way more concerned with that God created and why he created. And that's what we're going to jump into a lot. And so I encourage you, to stick with what we can know from Scripture. What does the Bible say about who God is? What does it say about creation and how creation came into being? And then let's just be honest about the things that we don't fully know. We don't fully understand or grasp. And so you may have some lively conversations, and you might hit some conversational, not dead ends, but maybe some cul-de-sacs which I know is semantics, but where you kind of go, hey, we're not sure. We don't know. Let's do some more research on this and circle back and talk about these things. So I think the other thing that you could talk about as well is just, how does this understanding of creation of Genesis, how does that shape the way I view the world? How does it shape the way I speak to others in terms of their own worldview and so on and so forth? So if you have questions, let me know. We might even, I don't know, we might even need to talk more about this stuff offline. Certainly we'll talk more about these things at our next life group leader training. But I hope you guys have a great week, and we'll see you in a bit.